Today, we'll be continuing the conversation with Suramya Kedia, VP of Brands and Strategic Growth at Great Galleon Ventures. Welcome to the Zista Podcast, where we invite industry leaders and academicians to answer queries that students have within a specific subject area. Let's jump straight into the session. Welcome back to the podcast, Suramya. It was really good speaking to you in the last episode.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
So I remember the last episode we spoke a little bit about the brand Rascal. I know you went over it a bit, but I wanted to know what are the brand strategies that you have created for the new beverage product Rascal?
I guess this is pretty straightforward. I think when you're developing a product, you kind of have to try and see what the market gap is. And sometimes, the market doesn't show you an obvious answer because some products are just new. For instance, Rascal is, I think, just a new product because it is sort of classed in the ready to drink or the bottled long drink / cocktails category, which Breezer and Bacardi Plus are usually classed in. But there's no historic, let's say, precedent for Rascal because it's really high alcohol content. It's 10%. That we kind of wanted to do because India is a strong beer drinking market. If you look at the volume, I mean, I think I might have the exact statistic wrong, so please don't quote me on it. But I think beer as a whole makes up for 53% of alcohol consumption in the country. And so then looking at what White Claw did in the US, they also were successful in capturing some, at least, of the really vast beer market in the US. So that was sort of a similar ambition for us, that we wanted to be competitive with strong beers, right? And secondly, not everyone likes the taste of strong beer or spirits, and that's sort of what we really are proud of, is that our blends actually taste quite good. I mean, I love the taste of them, and it seems like people are responding quite well to them as well. So we have a coffee flavor. It's called Twisted Coffee and Caramel.
Yeah.
We have like a mojito inspired flavor. It's called Fresh Lemon Mint, and then we have a classic rum and cola. So there's also strategy behind why we chose each of these flavors. I personally wanted Rascal to not be to be age agnostic and gender agnostic. So I don't want only people of a certain age, like Breezer drinkers, to drink Rascal, or women who are another historically known major consumer of RTDs like Breezers in India, to be the only consumers. So we created a flavor for each, let's say, taste profile. So, like, let's say coffee has a more earthy taste. So we wanted to do that to cater to spirits drinkers and beer drinkers. Whereas the Fresh Lemon Mint was based off of the fact that these citrusy flavors are bestsellers in the RTD category. And then the rum and cola was sort of my idea to have an all-weather take on RTDs, because beer sales usually tend to fall a little bit when the weather gets a bit colder, but rum sales really take off. So I wanted to see what happens when you have a rum-based RTD. So kind of wanted to have a product that isn't classed into any box, but really has mass appeal. So there's something for everyone for every season.
So the flavors are also something that you're currently experimenting with. So that will keep changing as the feedback comes.
Definitely. I mean, consumer feedback is everything to us. So I think one thing that I want to keep constant as a part of the culture of Rascal specifically, because it's birthed right now. Like it's, so you really can sort of inculcate that culture in the brand. Listening to consumer voices is super important. And we don't want to like axe these flavors, but hopefully, add some more or tweak the blends depending on response.
Awesome. So you have also named a few beverage brands. I wanted to know, can you give us a few more examples of those brands, and what are some of the metrics that make them stand out?
All right. So because I mentioned White Claw, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'll actually mention smaller brands now because my inspirations actually come from smaller brands, more on a personal level than they do from larger brands. So one of the brands that I rate quite highly is called Empirical Spirits, and I told you I spent some time in Denmark doing a master's, and this is a Danish company. Now I think that they've moved to the US because the US is just a much larger RTD market and spirits market than let's say Denmark, or sometimes like it's
Yeah.
it's just a lot more open to experimentation. And there's just also like a lot more, I think, funding for F&B in the US. I think that's sort of why they went there. But this was started by some people who used to work at this restaurant called Noma, which was has been for many years. I don't know if it currently is yet anymore or not. Been rated as the best restaurant in the world, and like the philosophies that Noma has is really, I think, what inspires me, and it's because of the artist inside me. I think that it's it's um it's not about giving consumers what they already want, but really pushing the boundaries of flavor and process, and really like creating categories of the future, as one might say. So that's sort of been carried forward by Empirical Spirits itself, and now they sort of create ready to drink, but also spirits that combine multiple different distillation and fermentation processes. And so it's not just, okay, like vodka has a process of being made, beer has a process of being made, sake has its own production process. And I have to say, like, the quality speaks for itself, the packaging speaks for itself. So on the product level, I think Empirical Spirits is something that really inspires me. On a strategy level, there's a company called Moth Drinks in the UK, and I've personally spoken to the founders quite a lot, so I know that I know their sort of founding story and how they're growing currently. And it was started by a graphic designer and this guy who used to work in mixology. And I think it's proof that, if you're in the industry working with consumers and putting consumers at the heart of your work, you will be successful. And what I like about their strategy is that although they are based in the UK, they didn't want to expand to all sales channels at once, or they didn't want to expand to all geographies outside the UK at once. They really picked their battles and put all their resources into, proving their strategy and their let's say business acumen and product acumen in one category. And once they had proved that, then they went to get additional funding, and then they used that sort of success and money to go to different channels. And I think that that's something that is very easy to forget, that you can't grow everywhere all at once, and sometimes you just have to have the patience to focus on one strategy and like and not get distracted. And I think they've done that really well.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you, how do you measure the effectiveness of your brand development efforts? And like, what are some of the metrics that you use?
So I think that with brands, the most direct metrics are sales, right? So your sales volumes at the end of the day, as well as your ROIs on marketing spends, are what will tell you whether your branding strategies are working or not. In today's day and age, sometimes those metrics are really thrown out the window because quite often a brand just never reaches profitability. But because the brand becomes known, so I think the third metric would be brand awareness. You can do dipstick studies to see how many people in the target markets that you've spent marketing budgets on have actually heard of your brand, let's say.
That's amazing. So just to kind of sum it up, so some of the metrics that you have shared were the ROI, the sales, and the brand awareness of the brand.
Yes.
Okay. So kind of coming back to the role as a brand developer, what are some of the skills and qualities in your opinion are essential to be a successful brand manager?
I think that it's basically just two sides of the coin. You have to be both have a sensitive and empathetic side to actually, understand what consumers need, but you also need to balance that out with an emphasis on numbers. So you kind of have to have both and combine them both. So it's a very unique role where you get to use both sides. People management is a very, very important one, because at some point, I mean, you obviously can't do everything yourself. So sort of knowing how to delegate and knowing how to manage a team, I think, is probably one of the toughest parts of the job, but very important.
Okay. What has been some of your challenges in achieving those skills or like honing those skills?
I mean, the only thing I can say is that you learn by doing and making mistakes, and that over time, as you learn from your mistakes, I think you just mature and you grow, and you know how to allocate your time. You know when to listen to your intuition, when to look at the numbers. You know how to balance all of that, and you start to get an understanding of people and who's good at what, and you have your own strengths and weaknesses, and you start to understand that as well. And I'm really at the very beginning, so I'm just learning right now.
I see that. And those are some of the power packed insights that you have shared. So I'm sure someone who's looking to start a business in this industry will find it useful, just to kind of like research and know more about stuff, understand the market trends and everything. Thank you so much for joining us for this session, Suramya.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was great to talk.
I hope you liked this session. To get more content like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon. Follow us on the audio platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. Till we meet again, I'd say stay curious.